I'm Matthew Cock. I'm a white cis man in my mid-50s with short, dark greying hair, and I'm wearing round reading glasses. And I'm the chief executive of VocalEyes, and we're a sector support organisation working with and for blind and visually impaired people. We seek to increase access and inclusion in the arts and heritage sectors, mostly through audio description services, training, resources, advocacy, and collaboration with other organisations. I'm approaching the theme today from the angle of inclusion and anti-ableism. Anti-ableism involves strategies, theories, actions, practices that challenge and counter ableism, that is, inequalities, prejudices, and discriminations based on disability. I'm using the word disabled today to refer to people who experience access barriers, including deaf and neurodivergent people, and those who may not identify as disabled but experience temporary or situational disability at the time of their encounter with an organisation. So this is very much the social and not the medical model of disability, with the onus on organisations to remove and reduce the disabling barriers. I'm going to focus mostly on volunteers and visitors and tell you about a project that we're running where volunteers help heritage organisations understand how they can better engage with visitors. And the main channel I'm concerned about is the organisation's own website, which is a key means of increasing inclusion and actively encouraging disabled people to become visitors. And to be even more specific, it's the access information page. There's strong evidence, about 95% in one survey, that a high proportion of disabled people plan their visit carefully beforehand, and mostly through visiting the venue's website. If people don't find the information that reassures them that their access needs are being met, they will often change their plans and not come. So if your organisation has no access information, or it's poor, has very little detail, you're excluding 1 in 5 UK citizens, and potentially also the friends, family, non-disabled companions who may have come with them. So we're involved in a project to combat this exclusion, and that this is the Heritage Access 2022 project, funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund in their digital volunteering strands. We've got amazing partners and advisors whose logos decorate the slide, who've helped design and deliver the projects. Access organisations, StageTech, Centre for Accessible Environments, Autism in Museums, AbilityNet. Academics, University of Westminster and Leicester, and heritage organisations, English Heritage, Heritage Volunteering Group, National Trust and Wellcome Collection. And I should add Wikimedia as well, where we're working on some of the data that we're collating through the project. We're going to upload to Wikidata because we realised there wasn't a source of this data beforehand. We're collecting it. Let's make it useful for someone else in future. So I hope Kelly's pleased with us. So yeah, here are all our amazing partners. And with those partners, we've recruited a team of volunteer researchers who will, between them, will visit the websites of over 3,000 heritage sites across the UK and do a thorough check of the access information that they provide. We can't visit all those venues in person to see what access facilities they have, but the quality of their online information is a proxy measurement. The purpose of access information, it does 4 things. It provides a visitor information. It gives them means of contact if they have more questions. You're invariably going to have someone whose needs you may not have considered, who needs to make contact. You also need to do something else, which is to make people feel welcome and considered, and reassure them that the access barriers have been met and removed at their venue. This isn't just a moment of planning. This is a moment. This moment on your website before their visit is also a decision-making point. Is it worth the visit at all? And finally, linking through to specific access resources and information about other events accessible events that may be elsewhere on the website. So basically, the access page is like a home page for your venue. So much of this is covered by detailed information, the first point, whether it's informational, so contact information, getting there, key features, access facilities, parking, lifts, accessible toilets, hearing loops, seating. It may be resource-based, visual stories, sensory maps, large print guides, etc. Or it may be, as I said, events that you have at your venue, British Sign Language tours, audio described tours. So we're going to publish a report later this year with guidelines on each of these, supporting venues who are creating their access information, links to good examples on heritage sites, and access and disability organisations for additional support. But it's not just about having a long list of resources. The other aspects, making people feel welcomed and reassured, is also conveyed more subtly in the language and tone, how your information is conveyed. Because there's been a legacy in museum and heritage websites, kind of as old as the internet itself, or as long as museums have been on the internet, of the access policy or the access statement, which has tainted the way that museums communicate with disabled people online. We don't communicate with visitors about the latest exhibition or event using policy statements or legalese. Then let's stop doing this with visitors who have access requirements. I'm on a personal mission to get rid of the references to we, our, or the museum, and for this to be replaced with direct communication addressed to the reader using the second person you. So I'm going to give you three real-world examples of sentences I've found on museum and heritage access pages that gives you an example of this. First, the most legalese I could find. This access statement does not contain personal opinions as to our suitability for those with access needs, but aims to accurately describe the facilities and service we offer all our guests/visitors. It's a completely useless sentence, this, but it's really, it makes you feel that they're just covering their backs or another part of their anatomy. Here's the most self-absorbed one I've ever found. The museum is committed to the widest possible access of our collection. To us, everyone has the right to access and engage with our collection and spaces and to feel welcomed and valued. I'm not going to read through all of this, but I've highlighted the amount of times they talk about themselves. And remember, this is being read by someone who's come to this page to find out something, and they're being talked about in the third person. So I fixed it for them. So this is what it really should read. Welcome to the museum. The staff are here to ensure you enjoy your visit to the collection and exhibition galleries. And then provide a useful piece of information. Lifts behind the information desk in the entrance hall provide step-free access to all floors. So in the one before, it showed off about their lift, but it didn't actually tell you where it was. This is one of the worst I've found. We want to make the museum as accessible as possible, but it's a 16th century Grade 1 listed building. And because of this, we cannot modify it to better accommodate disabled members of the public. Now, I'm not denying that having a Grade 1 listed building does put restrictions on what you can do, but to put this at the top of your access page, rather than a message about how people who are prevented from visiting the upper levels of this building might access the information or the objects there in an alternative way, I've got no time for. So as well as the information and the tone and the language of access information, there's the final element, which is the actual accessibility of the content itself. Does the is that information on your website accessible to blind and visually impaired people who might use a screen reader, or is that video accessible to someone who needs captions on the video, for example, or audio description on the video? And digital content accessibility spreads across many things. It's not just your public website, it's your social media, it's your email marketing, it's virtual events like this. It's internal as well. If you have deaf and disabled people on your staff, then your internal documents, your internal meetings, your internal digital meetings, and your other digital communications internally, they all need to be accessible as well. In terms of websites, there's often a common misconception that the accessibility is based solely on the framework that your developer or your digital agency hands over when a site is first launched. In fact, the accessibility of each individual item, whether it's a post, a tweet, an email newsletter, is in the hands of each team member who creates it. It's not a technical thing, it's something that everyone can do with simple online training. In the course that we do, a screen reader user shares their screen and the audio of the screen reader software's synthetic voice. They talk us through their process of navigating, browsing and reading using the keyboard alone. Once you've experienced this, you'll never leave out an alt tag, right click here, or fail to use heading tags again. So if you come away from my session with one message, it's this: as a heritage leader, you shouldn't be making one person responsible for access and inclusion, whether it's digital or more broadly. It has to be embedded with everyone's daily work and practice. So I want to talk a bit about volunteers. The 50 volunteers we recruited as researchers for the project are almost completely from the deaf, disabled and neurodivergent community. We proactively advertised for this in the role description and favoured their lived experience when selecting. The project and the wider sector benefit from their experience of access barriers. We've provided 50 disabled people training, CPD and work experience on a landmark project that could help start or progress their career in heritage. They gain skills and confidence in digital and heritage accessibility, and for some presenting at conferences, writing, contributing to the report, etc. And we'll use this experience to develop resources to help other sector organisations run remote digital volunteering projects in the future. A significant element of the project are the online training, CPD and co-design workshops with the volunteers. So we don't meet any of these volunteers, they don't leave their homes, they're all, and they really are spread around the UK. When we recruited, we also recruited by UK region. We didn't advertise in any national organisations. It was entirely through local volunteering websites. And so we have our 50 volunteers are spread across all the UK regions, the English regions, and Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. So there's a lot of online sessions. So designing these so that they work for people with a range of access requirements has been complex. And it requires budget and that you have to plan in from the beginning. So I put on the slide a list of the kind of 8 considerations that we have for each around access and designs. So multiple sessions, different times of day, self-description for blind and visually impaired people, not using the chat while speakers are talking, because if screen reader then gets a voice clash, they're getting the real voice of the human speaking, but then the voice, synthetic voice for the chat stuff. So we have an embargo on that. Slide content always spoken or described. We'll be able to tell signer. We have an in-person speech-to-text reporter rather than automated captioning. We have breaks, transcripts, audio and video. The other thing is keeping, well, after those sessions, while they're working on their research, keeping volunteers engaged and feeling part of the team. So we've engineered every different variation of opportunity to stay in touch, whether it's group sessions, one-to-one sessions, synchronous, so they have a video call, or asynchronous with a text chat, and whether their connection is with the managers, i.e. us in VocalEyes, or whether it's with peers. So the collaboration space, the Basecamp space we've got is mostly peer-to-peer, while the video calls and stuff are more with us. it's become incredibly clear since the pandemic that virtual meetings, live streamed events and so on have enabled disabled people to take part far more than they might have previously. And there's also strong evidence that flexible and home working benefits disabled people more than anyone else. And this has to be the case for remote and digital volunteering as well. Our project and others in the loss refund tranche intend to model best practice here. This is really positive, but it doesn't mean that you have an excuse not to make your heritage venues accessible for visitors and staff, and your online delivery and virtual workplaces are certainly not access features if you don't make them properly accessible to everyone. And as I said, this takes planning, consideration and budget built in. So I want to share with you a Virtuous Circle. I don't know if you can see that. It doesn't quite fit on the screen for me, but so this is one of those lovely word diagrams, and it's a circle with arrows linking a number of things. An accessible, inclusive venue does accessible marketing and communication, which leads to a stronger representation of disabled people among your visitors, which is strengthened through word of mouth and reputation. More disabled people will want to work and volunteer at your heritage site. You need to have an inclusive workplace and inclusive recruitment practice, and then there will be more disabled people among the workforce and boards of heritage organisations. This will lead to better awareness and prioritisation of access and inclusion at the heritage site, which leads to an accessible and inclusive venue. For this to work, everyone in the organisation has to be responsible for being alert to existing and potential access barriers and the task of removing them. You can't silo access and inclusion to be the responsibility of one person, unless that person is the organisation's leader, in which case you are the source of energy that drives this circle, using a collaborative leadership model to ensure everyone takes responsibility, making a commitment to access, inclusion and anti-ableism. And the value that underpins this for you is what Rachel Caldicott, and I'll share a link to this article, calls systemic digital care. The tone and ethos of your organisation's digital communications should be imbued with this. It's a care that aims to reduce harm and grief, a care that removes barriers and creates ease. And this involves you and your team being prepared, anticipating and learning, and inviting and responding to feedback. At the start of my talk, I mentioned people who experienced access barriers rely on a heritage site's website as part of the planning and decision-making process. Rachel Caldicott reminds us that not having to worry or plan ahead, not living in a constantly anticipatory space, is a form of privilege. Individuals or groups of people with such privilege can tend to forget or ignore their privilege. Having a diverse team is the surest way of avoiding this. Thank you. So there are links to various things I've used or talked about, which I will share with everyone afterwards. Thank you very much.